It happens in a single, electrifying moment. A kindergarten teacher named Amanda laughs at a joke in a crowded charity gala, and two billionaire tech CEOs stop seeing a priceless painting. They start seeing her. The paddle numbers climb from 50,000 to 500,000, but the real currency isn't money. It's pure, unadulterated jealousy. And when the winning bid is finally claimed, the real auction is just beginning. Amanda Thornton teaches 5-year-olds their ABCs by day. She volunteered for the auction simply to pour champagne. She had no idea she was about to become the most coveted lot in the room. This is the true story of how a single, unguarded laugh between rivals worth billions turned a charity event into a battlefield and an ordinary woman into the ultimate prize. What happens when winning isn't about money anymore, but about possession? To understand the earthquake, you first need to see the fault line. On one side, Nathan Cross, founder of Apex Systems, a man who built a $30 billion empire on cold, flawless logic. On the other, Elias Vance of Vance Innovations, his fiercest rival, a master of charismatic disruption. For a decade, they've fought over market share, patents, and headlines. But on this night, they would discover a new territory to conquer: a person. Amanda Thornton's world was built on crayon drawings and afternoon naps. Her classroom at Maple Grove Elementary was a sanctuary of bright colors and basic arithmetic. She lived in a small apartment that smelled of the lavender detergent she used. Her biggest concern, whether she had enough gold stars for her students on Friday. The invitation to volunteer at the Future Minds charity gala came from her friend Sophie, who worked for the event planner. "It's easy," Sophie had said. "Just pour champagne, look pretty, get a free meal. You need to get out." For Amanda, it was a chance to see a sliver of a world she only ever glimpsed through the windows of high-end stores. The Future Minds auction was the social event of the season, held at the Crystalline Anderton Museum. The cause was legitimate, funding STEM programs in underfunded schools, but the subtext was pure theater. It was a gladiatorial arena for status, where wealth was not just displayed but weaponized. Every year, the same players arrived, and every year, the rivalry between Cross and Vance was the main event. The previous year, they had driven the bidding on a vintage sports car to $2.3 million. The car was forgotten in a garage. The victory was everything. Nathan Cross arrived alone, as he always did. At 36, he was a study in controlled intensity. His dark hair was precisely cut, his navy suit a minimalist armor. He didn't network, he observed. He viewed the event as a necessary algorithmic input, a place to be seen supporting a cause, to monitor his competitors, and to occasionally acquire an asset. His jealousy wasn't a hot emotion. It was a cold calculation, a proprietary signal that something he had categorized as his was being contested. Elias Vance, at 38, was his photographic negative. He moved through the crowd like a celebrity, laughing, touching arms, surrounded by a magnetic field of attention. His smile was legendary, his open-collar shirt a calculated rebellion. Where Cross saw assets, Vance saw audiences. His possessiveness was performative, a public display of appetite meant to intimidate and attract in equal measure. He noticed Amanda not because she was beautiful, though she was, in a gentle, unstudied way, but because she was the only person in the room who wasn't trying to get something from someone. She was simply pouring champagne, offering a genuine, unpracticed smile to each guest. The first lot was a contemporary painting, all aggressive slashes of color. The bidding opened at $50,000. It quickly became a binary exchange. 100 from Cross barely lifting his paddle, 150 from Vance with a theatrical flourish. They volleyed back and forth, the room's attention tightening around them. The painting sold to Vance for $475,000. A murmur went through the crowd. Round 1 to Vance. Cross's expression didn't change, but his assistant, watching from the side, noted the subtle tightening of his jaw. Amanda, stationed near the stage, watched this with detached curiosity. It was like observing a nature documentary about two exotic birds. Their competition was so alien to her reality of grocery budgets and parent-teacher conferences that it almost seemed silly. During the lull before the next lot, as she refreshed glasses, she found herself near Vance's circle. He was telling a story about his first failed startup, self-deprecating and witty. Amanda, overhearing the punchline, let out a spontaneous, warm laugh. It wasn't a polite social titter, it was real. Vance turned, his eyes landing on her. He gave her a wink, a quick, inclusive gesture that said, "You get it." It was a throwaway moment, but from across the room, Nathan Cross saw it all. He saw Vance's attention pivot. He saw Amanda's laugh, the way her face lit up, and in his meticulously ordered mind, a variable changed. This woman was not part of his algorithm, but his rival's interest in her was a data point, a significant one. The next item was the centerpiece, a week-long safari for two, with a private guide and stays at exclusive eco-lodges. Bidding started at 80,000. It climbed rapidly, once again narrowing to the two familiar poles. At 200,000, Vance leaned over and said something to the woman next to him, who laughed loudly. Cross's gaze flickered from the auctioneer to Vance, then to Amanda, who was now watching the bidding with wide eyes. The numbers felt surreal to her. 250, Cross said, his voice cutting clearly through the room. 300, Vance countered immediately, shooting a grin toward his group. 400, Cross said, not a flicker of hesitation. The room held its breath. This was escalating beyond the item's value. This was pure contest. Vance paused, his smile turning razor-sharp. He looked directly at Cross, then let his gaze slide meaningfully toward Amanda, who stood innocently unaware. 500,000, Vance declared, and then he added, loud enough for his voice to carry, "And I'll throw in a donation to the volunteers' school of her choice. Let's make it personal." A ripple of shock and delight went through the crowd. This was new. This was human drama. All eyes swiveled to Amanda, who froze, her champagne flute halfway to a tray, her face flooding with color. She was no longer background. She was now part of the script. Nathan Cross did not look at Amanda. He kept his eyes locked on Elias Vance. The cold calculus in his mind was processing a new equation. This was no longer about a safari. Vance had just publicly connected the woman to the competition. He had made her a symbol. And in Nathan Cross's world, you did not let your rival claim symbols. You either acquired them or rendered them irrelevant. The auctioneer, flustered but professional, asked, "Do I hear 550? Cross stood up slowly. The simple action commanded a silence so complete you could hear the clink of ice in a distant glass. He didn't lift his paddle. He spoke directly to the auctioneer, but every word was meant for Vance. $1 million, he said, the number hanging in the air like a physical object. For the safari. He paused, letting the gasp subside. Then he continued, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet that somehow carried even further. "And I will purchase every remaining lot on this list at double its estimated value, right now." He finally turned his head not toward Vance but toward Amanda. His eyes held no warmth, no wink, only intense, focused assessment. "The bidding is over." The room erupted into chaos, but Amanda heard none of it. She was trapped in the laser focus of that stare, a kindergarten teacher who had just become the unspoken stake in a $1 million war. The gavel slammed down, declaring Cross the winner of everything. But as Elias Vance's smile twisted into something dark and furious, Amanda knew with chilling certainty that the real auction had just begun, and she was the prize neither man intended to lose. In the stunned silence that followed the gavel, two different battles were launched. One public, for the cameras and the crowd. The other, private, for the heart and mind of a woman who just wanted to go home. Nathan Cross had won the night, but Elias Vance had just been handed the perfect grievance. And the first rule of warfare is this: never let your enemy define the terms of engagement. While the event staff scrambled to process Cross's unprecedented blanket purchase, he didn't approach Amanda. He didn't need to. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, materialized at Amanda's side. "Mr. Cross would like his driver to take you home. For your safety, given the unusual attention." It wasn't a request. It was a deployment of resources. Blacktown car was already idling at the museum's service entrance, a route that avoided the paparazzi already gathering out front. Amanda, shell-shocked, nodded mutely. As she slid into the silent, leather-lined interior, she saw Nathan Cross through the window, already surrounded by reporters, his expression one of detached boredom. He never looked her way. The message was clear. His intervention was a strategic move, not a romantic one. She was a secured asset. Elias Vance, however, understood theater. He held an impromptu press scrum on the museum steps, flashing his wounded, gallant smile. "I guess some people think generosity has a price cap," he quipped, drawing laughs. but real giving comes from the heart, not the checkbook. My offer to that wonderful volunteers school still stands. Let's call it the spirit of the gala grant." With that single line, he reframed the entire night. Cross was the cold monopolist. Vance was the passionate, people's champion, and Amanda, she was the damsel in distress, the symbol of community that Vance was protecting from corporate greed. By the time Amanda's town car merged into traffic, Vance's narrative was already trending. The next morning, Amanda's phone exploded. First, a formal email from the Future Minds board thanking her for her inadvertent role in a record-breaking fundraiser. Attached was a press release detailing Cross's total contribution, $3.2 million. Then a notification for a wire transfer from an unknown LLC, $25,000. The memo line read, "Consulting discretion appreciated." Her heart stopped. Was this from Cross, payment for her unwitting role? Before she could process it, her school principal called. "Amanda, the Vance Innovations Foundation just pledged $50,000 for a new science lab. They said it was inspired by you. What on earth happened last night?" She was caught in a crossfire of generosity, each dollar a bullet meant for the other man. That afternoon, the first delivery arrived at her apartment, an enormous, absurd bouquet of exotic orchids. The card, in elegant script, read, "For the only genuine laugh in the room." 10 minutes later, a courier delivered a simple, heavy box. Inside, on gray velvet, was a pair of diamond stud earrings. The note was typewritten on crisp, unmarked cardstock, appropriate compensation for unforeseen externalities. Wear them or sell them, the choice is yours. The contrast was brutal. Vance offered emotion, a connection. Cross offered a transaction, a cold valuation. Both assumed she was for sale, they just disagreed on the currency. Amanda's instinct was to hide. She called in sick to school, terrified of the spotlight, but the world had already found her door. A gossip site, The Circuit, ran a blind item, which rivaled tech titans turned a charity auction into a bidding war for a certain champagne-serving schoolmom. The comments filled with speculation, her social media with friend requests from strangers. Her quiet life had been dissected in 12 hours. Nathan Cross's approach was systemic, efficient. Claire, his assistant, called Amanda directly. "Mr. Cross would like to discuss the educational grant component of his donation. He prefers to direct funds with maximum impact. Can you meet tomorrow at 10 at his offices?" Again, not a question. The venue was his territory, the context was business. Amanda, feeling she owed something to her school, agreed. She wore her simple black dress, leaving the diamond earrings in their box. Apex Systems' headquarters was a minimalist monument of glass and steel, a building designed to intimidate. In his office on the top floor, Nathan Cross stood before a wall of data visualizations, not behind his desk. He didn't offer small talk. "You teach kindergarten," he stated, turning to her. "Your school's test scores in early literacy are 12% below the district average. Your principal's grant applications are poorly structured. My donation, directed properly, could correct that." For 20 minutes, he laid out a plan with the precision of a military campaign: new phonics software, teacher training, a nutrition program. He cited studies, cost-benefit analyses. He never mentioned the auction, the rivalry, or her. He was hiring her as a consultant on her own life's work. It was flattering, disorienting, and dehumanizing all at once. As she left, he finally said one personal thing. "Vance's grant is a publicity stunt. It will be a photo op, then forgotten. Mine will work. Choose the outcome, not the applause." He had reframed the entire competition as a choice between substance and flash. Elias Vance's countermove was personal, invasive, and brilliantly effective. That evening, as Amanda walked to her local grocery store, a sleek convertible pulled up beside her. Vance himself was driving, sunglasses on, looking like he'd stepped from a magazine. "Amanda, fancy meeting you here. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd see where the magic happens." He gestured to the modest street. "Buy you a coffee? I know a place." He was in her world, unannounced, breaking every boundary. Over cappuccinos at a cramped cafe, he was everything Cross was not. Charming, self-effacing, intently focused on her. He asked about her students, told funny stories about his own failures, and made her laugh again. Then he leaned in. "Nathan Cross sees people as widgets. I saw you as a person." He bought the room to own the moment. "I just wanted to make you smile." He placed a small, wrapped gift on the table. "Open it later." When he dropped her back at her apartment, he didn't try to come up. He just said, "The world's more interesting with you in it, Amanda Thornton, and drove away. The gift was a first-edition copy of her favorite childhood book, The Velveteen Rabbit, the one she read to her class every year. The inscription read, "To the realest thing in the room." It was a devastatingly perfect gesture. It showed he'd researched her, understood her, and spoke her emotional language. That night, Amanda stared at the two tokens on her kitchen table, the cold, magnificent diamonds and the worn, perfect book. They weren't just gifts, they were manifestos. The escalation went nuclear 48 hours later. The circuit published a follow-up, this time with photos, Amanda leaving Apex Towers looking serious, Amanda laughing in the cafe with Vance looking carefree. The headline, "Substance versus Style, the Teacher's Choice." The article was a blatant comparison, painting Cross as a controlling robot and Vance as a romantic hero. It was clearly planted by Vance's team. Nathan Cross's response was not public, it was private, and it was terrifying. Amanda received a secure, encrypted link via text from an unknown number. It led to a dossier. Inside were financial records, sealed lawsuit settlements, and testimonies from former employees of Vance Innovations. It outlined a pattern. Vance's famous, charismatic disruption was often a cover for bullying, for stealing credit, for burning out brilliant people and discarding them. The dossier alleged that his Spirit of the Gala grant had, in 3 previous instances, been used as a tax write-off and never fully funded. The final page was a single sentence: "Sentiment is a marketing strategy, data is the truth." It was unsigned. It was from Cross. He had just shown her the man behind Vance's smile, and it was uglier than she could have imagined. Now Amanda was truly trapped. One man offered a future built on cold, hard, effective truth. The other offered a present full of warm, intoxicating, potentially false feeling. To choose Cross was to choose a gilded cage of logic. To choose Vance was to step onto a stage of beautiful illusions. But to choose neither, that seemed impossible. Their war had enveloped her completely. The breaking point came from an unexpected direction. Her father, a retired mechanic who lived 3 states away, called her, his voice shaking with anger. "Some fancy lawyer just called me Amanda. Asked all sorts of questions about our family, about you growing up. Said it was a background check for a confidential opportunity. Who the hell are you involved with?" Cross was due diligencing her, like a company he was acquiring. The violation was absolute. That same afternoon, Vance, coincidentally, posted an old photo of himself volunteering at a community garden on the same day her father called. The caption, "Roots Matter, #real values." The synchronicity was too perfect. He was monitoring her too, and performing the empathy she craved. Amanda snapped. She took the diamond earrings, the first edition book, and the dossier printout, put them in a box, and requested an Uber. She didn't know where she was going, but as the car navigated the evening traffic, she realized there was only one way to end this. She couldn't hide in her apartment. She couldn't choose one monster over the other. She had to confront the source. She gave the driver a new address, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was the location of a live, televised tech debate forum where both Nathan Cross and Elias Vance were scheduled to appear on a panel that very night. She was going to walk into the lion's den, return their gifts, and tell them both to leave her life forever. It was a naive plan, a fantasy of reclaiming control. But as her car pulled up to the brightly lit theater, she saw the swarm of media and the silhouettes of the powerful moving inside. She had just made a catastrophic miscalculation. She was about to give the war its greatest weapon, a public showdown, and neither rival would let her walk away without claiming victory. Amanda believed she was walking in to make a statement. What she didn't understand was that in a war between giants, there are no neutral parties. There are only assets, audiences, and enemies, and by stepping onto that stage, she had just volunteered to be all 3. The tech-forward debate was held in a 2,000-seat auditorium, broadcast live on a major business network. Backstage, Nathan Cross was reviewing his notes on antitrust regulations when his head of security whispered in his ear. His expression didn't change, but he closed his folder with a definitive snap. Elias Vance, meanwhile, was charming a group of journalists when he saw Amanda being stopped at a security checkpoint on a monitor. A wolfish grin spread across his face. "Looks like we have a special guest," he announced to the room. "Let's make her welcome." Both men, in that instant, recalibrated their entire strategy for the night. The debate topics were irrelevant now. A new, unpredictable variable had entered the field. Amanda, holding her box of return tokens, managed to get a guest pass by insisting she had a delivery for Mr. Cross from the charity. She was escorted not to the green room, but to a seat in the third row, directly in the sightline of the panelists' podium. The lights went down, the moderator introduced the rivals, and the debate began. For 20 minutes, they parried over data privacy and market innovation. Their answers were polite, technical, and utterly bloodless. The audience was beginning to fidget. Then the moderator opened the floor to questions. A hand shot up in the third row. Amanda stood, her legs trembling. The spotlight found her. A murmur went through the crowd as some recognized her from the gossip items. "My question is for both Mr. Cross and Mr. Vance," she said, her voice surprisingly steady thanks to years of commanding a classroom. "When does philanthropy become possession?" She lifted the box. "I came here tonight to return the diamonds, the book, and the accusations. I'm not a lot to be won. My school is not a battlefield. My life is not a PR strategy. My question is, will you stop?" Silence was absolute, then exploded into frantic whispers and clicking cameras. The moderator was paralyzed. This was not in the script. Nathan Cross leaned into his microphone first. His voice was calm, analytical. "A transaction requires two willing parties. You are interpreting strategic allocation of capital as personal pursuit. That is an emotional, not a logical framework. The funds for your school are waiting. The choice to utilize them remains, as it always has been, yours." He had sidestepped her entire emotional appeal and reframed it as a problem with her reasoning. He hadn't denied the war. He'd simply claimed she was misunderstanding its nature. Elias Vance saw his opening and took it with theatrical grace. He stood up, not bothering with the microphone. "Amanda," he said, his voice filled with contrite warmth, "you're absolutely right, and I apologize sincerely." The crowd gasped. A public apology from Vance was unheard of. "In trying to champion you, I objectified you. That's on me. The grant to your school stands, no strings attached, and to prove it," he turned to Nathan Cross. "Nathan, you want efficiency? Let's be efficient. You match my grant dollar for dollar, right now, on stage. No names on the building, just the money where it matters. Let's call a truce for her." It was a masterstroke. He had publicly admitted fault, making Cross's cold logic look heartless. He had doubled the money for her cause, painting himself as the true philanthropist, and he had trapped Cross in a live, public ultimatum. All eyes swung to Nathan Cross, a man who never ever acted on impulse. The calculus was immense. Refuse, and he's the villain who blocked money for children. Agree, and he submits to Vance's framing, following his rival's lead. Cross looked at Amanda, then at Vance, then at the expectant audience. He gave a single, curt nod. "The funds will be transferred before midnight." The audience burst into applause. Vance had won the room, and he'd used Amanda's courage as the lever to do it. But Nathan Cross was not finished. As the applause died down, he spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise. "Since we are being transparent, Ms. Thornton, you should have all relevant data." He nodded to his assistant, Claire, at the side of the stage. Instantly, the massive screen behind the panelists changed. It showed an email chain. The sender was a PR agency, the recipient was Elias Vance. The subject line, Operation Cinderella Narrative Timeline. The first email, dated the morning after the auction, outlined the strategy. Phase 1, establish emotional contrast, warmth versus cold. Phase 2, locate and exploit subject's personal sentimental triggers, see attached psych profile. Phase 3, engineer public reconciliation moment for maximum hero positioning. The attached psych profile was a dossier on Amanda, her favorite book, her father's occupation, her college thesis topic, her social media habits. It was the blueprint for Vance's entire genuine campaign. The room descended into chaos. Vance's face drained of color. Amanda felt the world tilt beneath her. The perfect personal gift, the chance meeting at her grocery store, the empathetic post about roots. All of it was a calculated plan derived from a report. Vance jumped to his feet. This is a doctored forgery, a desperate smear from a man who can't win a fair fight. But the damage was done, the illusion was shattered. Cross hadn't defended himself with words. He deployed a weaponized fact. He turned his gaze to Amanda, who was staring at the screen in horror. "You asked when philanthropy becomes possession," he said, his voice quieting the room. "I would argue it is when the charity is a prop and the person is a profile." He had just proven that Vance's heart was a business plan, while his own coldness was at least an honest transaction. The debate ended in pandemonium. Amanda fled the auditorium, the box of gifts discarded under her seat. She didn't get far. Claire intercepted her at a side exit. Mr. Cross believes you may require security detail. The media scrutiny will be intense, and Mr. Vance may be volatile. This time, Amanda didn't resist. She was numb. The town car was there again, but instead of taking her home, it delivered her to a private airfield. A helicopter waited, its blades whipping the air. Claire handed her a noise-canceling headset. He thought you might appreciate some distance from the storm. 20 minutes later, the helicopter set down on the secluded grounds of a modern, glass-walled house overlooking the ocean. It was not opulent in a traditional sense. It was stark, serene, and utterly private. Nathan Cross was waiting on the deck, holding 2 glasses of water. He handed one to her. "No diamonds, no books, no dossiers," he said. "Just a place where no one can shout at you." For the first time, she saw him not as a CEO or a rival, but as a person who also lived in a goldfish bowl, who also understood the crushing weight of constant performance. His solitude wasn't just preference, it was survival. He didn't speak for a long time. He let her breathe, let her watch the waves. When he finally did, his voice was different, stripped of its boardroom precision. "Everything I said on stage was true. Vance's campaign was a structured operation, but my motivation was not purely logical." He took a sip of water. "When Vance made you part of the competition, he introduced an irrational variable. In my world, I control the variables. The most efficient way to control this one was to own the game. But efficiency," he said, looking at her directly, "is not the same as intent." "What was your intent?" Amanda asked, her voice barely a whisper. "To see," he said simply, "to see if the person who laughed like that, who stood up in that room like that, was a variable or a constant." It was the closest thing to a vulnerable admission he could make. He wasn't claiming to have pure feelings. He was admitting his own process was flawed, contaminated by curiosity about her. Back in the city, Elias Vance was in full damage control mode, but the leaked emails were a wound that wouldn't close. In his fury, he made a fatal error. He gave an interview to a blogger trying to spin the leak. "So I run a tight PR operation? Guilty. But at least my strategy brings joy. Cross's strategy brings spreadsheets. Who would you choose?" It was a defiant, arrogant performance. And it contained one offhand line that would become a noose. "I mean, the teacher was a great symbol, perfect for the narrative. Wholesome, relatable, the real against our plastic world." The word symbol echoed. It validated everything Cross had implied. Amanda, watching the interview clip on a tablet in the silent beach house, felt a final piece of her illusion break. She had never been a person to Vance. She had been a casting choice. Nathan's phone buzzed relentlessly, but he ignored it. He showed Amanda the plans for the school grants, now merged into a single massive fund. He asked for her input, not as a consultant, but as the expert in the room. For the first time, someone in this saga was listening to her about what she actually knew. It wasn't romance. It was respect. And in the quiet of that house, away from the performative chaos, that respect felt more real than any grand gesture. But the storm was still raging. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. Vance's Cinderella plot exposed. Cross's Cold War turns hot with hack. The narrative had solidified. Vance was the manipulative puppet master, Cross was the ruthless spy. And Amanda, she was missing. Her disappearance sparked wild conspiracy theories. Was she with Cross? Had Vance scared her into hiding? The public's appetite for the story was now insatiable. Claire approached Amanda with a secure tablet. "You have a choice to make. The story will continue with or without you. You can remain here, off-grid, until it burns itself out. Or," Claire said, pulling up a draft press release, "you can define it." The release was simple, a statement from Amanda Thornton, thanking both parties for their combined donation to the school district, announcing her resignation from her teaching position to oversee the grant's implementation full-time, and requesting privacy for herself and her family. It was a gracious, professional, and definitive exit from the personal drama. It reframed her not as a prize, but as a professional stepping into a new role funded by the conflict. It was the ultimate power move, using their war chest to buy her own freedom and purpose. Amanda looked from the tablet to Nathan, who was watching the ocean. "Is this your solution?" she asked him. "It is a viable option," he said, not turning around. The most strategically sound one for your long-term autonomy. And what's in it for you? She pressed. He finally looked at her, closure to the variable, and the knowledge that the capital, at least, was put to correct use. She understood then. This was his version of letting go, providing her with a bridge to walk away on. It was perhaps the first truly selfless thing either man had offered. It came wrapped in strategy, but the result was her freedom. Amanda made her decision. She approved the press release. It went out at noon the next day. The media cyclone, deprived of its central figure, began to slowly lose steam. The story shifted from who will she choose to where did she go, and finally to how the rivalry funded a revolution in local schools. A month later, the new educational initiative held its launch event. Amanda, now the publicly named director of the Crossvance Future Minds Fund, stood at a podium in a renovated school library. She gave a speech about early childhood education, not about billionaires. The cameras were there, but they were pointed at the children cutting a ribbon, not at her. Nathan Cross attended alone. He stood at the back, listened to her speech, and left before the reception. Elias Vance did not come. He was reportedly traveling. After the event, as Amanda packed up her notes, a courier delivered a small package, no return address. Inside was a simple, unadorned key. A handwritten note in a precise, familiar script read, "The Beach House, a quiet place to work if you ever need it. The alarm code is your birth date. It is not a gift. It is a resource. Use it or don't." He wasn't offering love. He wasn't offering a cage. He was offering a tool. And in the aftermath of a war fought over her, a tool she could use with no strings attached felt like the most honest thing she'd ever received. The rivalry between Cross and Vance would continue in boardrooms and markets, but the battle for Amanda Thornton was over. She had, against all odds, won, not by choosing a man, but by choosing herself. And as she held that key in her hand, she realized the final, shocking truth. The ultimate power move wasn't fought between them at all. It was the move she made to step off their battlefield and build her own kingdom. But the quiet of her victory was about to be shattered, because in the world of giants, no one truly walks away without paying a price, and the final invoice was just about to arrive. The price arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet legal document, a lawsuit, not against Amanda, but against Nathan Cross, filed by Elias Vance. The charge, corporate espionage and unlawful interception of electronic communications, the leaked emails. Vance was using the law to wage the final battle, and in doing so, he was about to pull Amanda back into the witness stand of public opinion. The legal complaint was a masterpiece of strategic victimhood. Vance portrayed himself as a businessman whose private strategies were stolen by a jealous rival, causing irreparable harm to his reputation and business. The discovery process meant subpoenas. Amanda's name was on the list. Her emails, her texts, her call logs, everything from the night of the auction onward would be demanded as evidence to show the human impact and motivation behind Cross's alleged hack. Her hard-won privacy was evaporating. Nathan Cross's legal team was characteristically ruthless. They filed a counterclaim, accusing Vance of defamation and of orchestrating a harassment campaign disguised as romance. Their evidence included the original Operation Cinderella documents and, more damningly, records showing Vance's team had hired a private investigator to follow Amanda in the days after the auction. The legal battle became a public bloodsport, with each motion, each filing, leaked to the press. Amanda was trapped in the middle, her past 6 months dissected in legal briefs. Her first instinct was to run. She had the key to the beach house. She could disappear. But Claire, now acting as a reluctant liaison, advised against it. If you flee a subpoena, you look like his puppet, like you're hiding with his resources. You need to be seen as independent, or you become evidence for Vance. The only path forward was to engage on her own terms. Amanda hired her own lawyer, paid for with the consulting fee she'd never touched from that mysterious wire transfer. She would comply with the legal process, but through her own counsel. It was a declaration of neutrality that infuriated both sides. The deposition was the crucible. Vance's lawyers asked gently leading questions, trying to paint a picture of a woman manipulated and frightened by Nathan Cross's cold, overpowering influence. They asked about the helicopter ride, the secluded house, the key. They implied coercion. Amanda stuck to facts. I was offered transport and solitude during a media frenzy. I accepted. I was given a resource to use at my discretion. I have not used it. She refused to be a victim. Then Cross's lawyers took their turn. They were aggressive, focusing on Vance's calculated campaign. They asked about the psychological profile, the chance meetings, the feeling of being researched and staged. They sought to prove malicious intent. Again, Amanda refused the easy narrative. I felt seen, then I felt staged. The harm was in the deception, not the pursuit. She wouldn't vilify one to exonerate the other. Her consistent, frustrating neutrality began to drive a wedge into the case itself. The judge, growing impatient with the personal drama clouding a corporate espionage claim, pushed for a settlement. The settlement conference was held in a sterile, windowless room. Amanda attended, required as a party to the dispute. For the first time since the debate stage, she was in the same room with both men. The energy was icy. Vance, stripped of his public charm, was tense and glared at Cross. Cross, as ever, was impassive. The negotiations were brutal, a dense thicket of financial penalties, non-disclosure agreements, and non-disparagement clauses. They argued over millions, over admissions of fault, over who would control the narrative going forward. Amanda listened for an hour before she finally spoke, her voice calm in the tense room. "You're arguing over who gets to own the story, but you both lost that right the moment you made it about a person who wasn't you." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to propose a term for the settlement, from both parties." The lawyers looked horrified. The judge, intrigued, nodded. Amanda's term was simple, a permanent, legally binding injunction. Neither Nathan Cross nor Elias Vance, nor any entity under their control, would ever publicly speak of her, reference her, or use her image or name in any commercial or promotional context, in perpetuity. They would be erased from her story and she from theirs. It was a demand for total silence. Vance's lawyer immediately objected. "My client's reputation repair requires addressing the narrative." He was cut off by Nathan Cross. "Agreed," Cross said, the word dropping into the room like a stone. All eyes turned to him. His own lawyer looked stunned. Vance stared, searching for the trick. Cross looked only at Amanda. "It is the logical conclusion. The variable is removed permanently." For him, it was strategic closure. For Vance, it was a gag order that destroyed his chance to ever publicly rehabilitate his Cinderella persona. Faced with Cross's agreement and the judge's clear preference for the term, Vance had no choice. He snarled his assent. The settlement was signed. The legal war ended not with a bang, but with a silence so absolute it was louder than any headline. The combined financial penalties were donated, under court order, to the Future Minds Fund, anonymously. The rivalry between Apex and Vance Innovations continued, but it retreated to the familiar trenches of patents and market share. The personal feud was buried under a mountain of legal restrictions. In the year that followed, Amanda Thornton's life transformed, but on her own axis. The Cross-Vance Fund, now massively endowed, became a model for private-public educational partnerships. She traveled the country, advising other districts, her name associated with innovation in early learning, not with billionaire drama. She sold her apartment and bought a small, sunlit condo with a view of the city's skyline. She did not use the key to the beach house. Nathan Cross focused on expanding his empire into sustainable energy, a pivot that analysts dubbed cold logic meeting a hot planet. He was photographed occasionally, always alone. In a rare profile, a journalist asked about the auction incident, referencing the legal settlement. Cross's reply was curt and final: "That matter is legally closed. My focus is on systems with measurable outputs, not narratives." He had, true to his word, erased her. Elias Vance struggled. His charismatic disruptor brand was permanently tarnished by the exposed emails. He rebranded his company, stepped back from the public eye, and focused on venture capital. The gossip columns moved on to new feuds, new scandals. The story seemed to have found its ending. A teacher empowered, rivals chastened, capital put to good use. A modern fairy tale with a feminist twist. But the most surprising detail emerged from an unlikely source: a regulatory filing. 18 months after the settlement, Apex Systems quietly dissolved a small, wholly owned subsidiary named Janus Holdings. The filing listed its sole asset, the intellectual property and patent portfolio for a revolutionary, low-cost sensory learning tablet for children with developmental disabilities. The technology had been developed in total secrecy. The filing noted that all patents and IP had been transferred for the sum of $1 to a nonprofit foundation. The foundation's name was not listed in the Apex filing. A tech journalist digging through the dry document cross-referenced it with nonprofit registry filings. The recipient foundation was the Thornton Learning Foundation, a new charitable entity founded by Amanda Thornton. The timeline was telling. Janus Holdings had been acquired by Apex 6 weeks after the charity auction. Its research and development budget, funded entirely by Apex, had been substantial. The transfer to Amanda's foundation occurred the week after the legal settlement was finalized. Nathan Cross had not simply given her money or a house. He had quietly built, over the course of a year and a half, a groundbreaking tool for the exact field she was devoted to. He had invested millions in R&D, not for market advantage, but to create an asset. And then he gave it to her, burying the transaction in corporate bureaucracy, ensuring no one would know. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a profound, secret investment in her life's work. It was his version of an apology and a testament, all hidden in a footnote of a financial report. He had seen her not as a prize or a variable, but as a cause worth funding, an outcome worth engineering. And he asked for no credit, required no thanks. It was the final, definitive move in their strange dance, the ultimate logical conclusion of his possessive jealousy, transformed into anonymous, generative respect. Amanda, when asked about the foundation's sudden acquisition of the valuable patent portfolio, simply said, "We received a generous, anonymous donation of technology. Our focus is on getting it into classrooms." She may never have known its full origin, or perhaps she understood perfectly. The auction paddle that started at $50,000 had ultimately yielded a fortune for charity, a career for a teacher, a scar for a manipulator, and a secret legacy from a lonely man. The rivalry over a laugh didn't end with a wedding or a chosen suitor. It ended with a courtroom silence and a gift hidden in plain sight. The possessiveness was not conquered, it was channeled. The jealousy was not resolved, it was transformed. And the woman at the center didn't get a prince. She got a kingdom of her own making, funded by the wars of kings. The final, unspoken truth was this: in the economy of attention, the greatest power is not in being fought over, but in using the weapons of that war to build something that lasts long after the fighters have turned away. So what is the true currency of a story like this? It was never the millions bid at the auction or the diamonds in a velvet box. The real economy was attention, a finite, precious resource fought over by empires and individuals alike. Amanda Thornton became a sudden, unexpected reservoir of it. Her authenticity, her laugh, her very normalcy became a Chinese letter commodity in a room saturated with calculation. The tale of the teacher and the titans holds up a dark mirror to our own world. It asks an uncomfortable question. In an age where our attention is the most valuable thing we possess, what happens when powerful forces decide they want yours? Not just for a moment, but to own, to shape, to deploy. We see it in the algorithms that predict our desires, in the curated personas that vie for our follows, in the polarizing narratives that demand our outrage. Amanda's experience was that phenomenon distilled into a human drama, played out not on a screen, but in real life, with real consequences. Nathan Cross's journey reveals a paradox of modern power. Logic and control can acquire anything, but they cannot command the very human elements that make life worthwhile: genuine connection, uncalculated joy. His ultimate, anonymous gift was perhaps the closest such a man could come to understanding that. It was an act of creation, not acquisition. Elias Vance's arc exposes the hollow core of manufactured sentiment. When charm is a strategy and empathy is a tactic, the collapse is inevitable, leaving only bitterness and legal bills. And Amanda, her victory was neither romantic nor simple. She did not tame the beast or marry the prince. She was scarred by the experience, forced to become a strategist in her own defense, to learn the brutal rules of a game she never asked to play. But in doing so, she reclaimed the most valuable territory of all, her own narrative. She transformed their conflict into her capital, their rivalry into her resources, their obsession into her opportunity. She proved that the object of a war can become the architect of the peace. The lingering question this story leaves us with is not who she should have chosen. It's whether any of us, in her shoes, could have navigated that gale force attention with as much grace or emerged with our sense of self intact. It's about the cost of being seen in a world that looks at everything as either an asset, an audience, or an obstacle. The charity gala ended. The news cycle moved on, but the tremors of that single laugh continued to reshape lives in quiet, profound ways. In classrooms where children use revolutionary learning tools, in boardrooms where rivals measure their words more carefully, and in the quiet resolve of one woman who learned that sometimes the greatest power lies not in being fought for, but in what you build after the battle ends. If you found this exploration of power, attention, and the unexpected turns of modern life compelling, make sure to subscribe. We delve deep into the human stories behind the headlines, uncovering the truths that linger long after the spotlight fades. Thanks for watching.